Okay, it's the final push. It's numbers 5 to 1. Number 5, it's a template film. As I've previously mentioned, a template Bond film is a Bond film they go to when they want to make a certain type of Bond film, and this is the back to basics one, when they want to make a tough, gritty spy story. This is Russia with Love. Okay, for many this is one of the absolute greatest Bond films. Obviously I've put it at number 5. Not much massive action or spectacle in this, but I feel it's got to be in there because there's a lot of elements in this that are not only very good, they're just essential to the series. First thing, it's the first one to have a pre-credit sequence, and secondly, it's the first one to have a proper theme song. Great song from Russia with Love by Matt Monro, brilliant singer, and they developed the credit sequence idea as well, even further with the projections onto bodies and stuff like that. First film to have a musical score by John Barry. Not one of his best scores, but a good solid score that starts to create the James Bond sound and the Bondian atmosphere. Sean Connery's one film under his belt. He's getting very secure, gives a great performance as Bond. Q, well, he's called Major Boothroyd in this. Desmond Llewellyn comes into it. Bernard Lee as M. Lois Maxwell's Moneypenny again. All the elements are in there that will see us through with the Bond films for many years. Bond Girl's really good in it. But what really elevates this film, obviously the film prior to this, Dr. No, had a really cool villain. This film has two of the greatest villains ever, not only in Bond history but possibly in cinema, and that is the character of Red Grant, played by the magnificent Robert Shaw, and the female villainess Rosa Klebb. Brilliant Red Grant, someone who's a genuine threat, quite a frightening character if you read the Russia with Love book. The guy's just a proper psychopath, a born killer. So quite a frightening character, and that's really well depicted in the film, and someone who could be a real danger to Bond. Rosa Klebb, obviously she's got poisonous spike that comes out of her shoe. She's brilliant. One of my favourite scenes in Bond is where she goes to see the Red Grant character. She gets a knuckle duster and whacks him in the stomach. He doesn't flinch, and she just says, "He seems fit enough. Have him report to Istanbul in 24 hours. I love that bit. The film also establishes the Bond Ali, and it's the character of Kerman Bay. So this character appears in other films as a kind of trope, like the Topol character in For Your Eyes Only, which previously mentioned, or the Mathis character in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. So Kerman Bay's a great character. It's got loads of like really atmospheric sequences. It's kind of Hitchcockian. It's a straight ahead spy story. It's probably the most straight ahead Bond film that they've ever made. They've probably never quite made one like this again, because the issue of sort of stunts and spectacle came into things more. Yeah, it's a little longer than Dr. No, but it's under 2 hours, so it zips along a little quicker. Bond films are still finding that final template, but it's a classic James Bond film, and that's number 5, Russia with Love. Number 4 is a film that's dear to my heart. This was my film of 1977, and I had the toy Lotus Esprit, also had the Aston Martin from the other films, and of course it's The Spy Who Loved Me. For a long time, Golden Gun and Live and Let Die were my preferred Rogers, but the last couple of times I've watched this, I've realised, it really comes together in this film, and some elements I didn't like as much before, I think are better now. I think Roger's great in this. I think he looks great. He's got great hair dye. He controls the scenes well. When he's got humour, he balances right. When he needs to be a bit tougher, he balances it right. Barbara Bach as Angel XXX, she's really effective. I didn't used to like her as much a character, but when I watched her recently, I was like, yeah, really solid female lead. Kurt Jürgens Stromberg, probably the weak element, not as good as it could have been, but that's made up for with Jaws, who in this film is fantastic, basically taking up the mantle of The Odd Job had in Goldfinger, and being a brilliant henchman, and all the scenes involved with Jaws are really good, because they can be comical and menacing at the same time. It's got great one-liners, fantastic theme song by Carly Simon, slightly different for a Bond film. in some ways. Quite an interesting Marvin Hamlish score. Doesn't always work, but it's got a little bit of disco and some cool themes, and he makes his presence felt. Got probably the greatest pre-credit sequence ever. Basically, Bond's chased on skis, and he skis off a precipice. At the time, he falls off a cliff. No one knows what's going to happen, and then his parachute opens, and it's got a Union Jack. This was released in Jubilee, had a world premiere, and like Skyfall later, it caught the timing perfectly, caught the mood of the country, and it was a huge hit. And it re-established Bond. After the disappointment of Golden Gun, it re-established Bond at the box office in America and globally. The sets are amazing. I watched it on Blu-ray recently. The Ken Adams sets in Stromberg's Liparus Tank are brilliant. It just looks amazing. The pacing's really good. Yeah, it's got some dodgy model work, some dodgy process work, but the Lotus Esprit still looks cool. A very 70s choice, and that kind of puts it in its era. But it just looks classy, this film. It looks expensive. It looks like it means business, and everything's up there on the screen. And it's Roger Moore's one classic Bond. I enjoy Roger Moore. I love the Roger Moore films, just because I grew up with him. But this is a classic Bond. Really, the Bond films I'm doing now are the classic Bonds, the top 5. These are what I call, gold standard Bonds, I suppose. The other Bonds, the ones that came in the last batch I talked about, are ones that are really good. They've just got some flaws that stop them getting above a certain notch. The ones before that, like your Thunderbolts, License to Kill, You Only Live Twice, they're really good Bonds. They're good Bonds. They're not, but they've got some disappointing elements, but they're still a great night out of the pictures. And then your sort of bottom Bonds veer between being boring or dull, like Spectre, or just crap, like View to a Kill. Yeah, but generally, Bond films, there's not many of them where you're not going to be entertained. But this one, gold standard. Very, very good film. And I've just got fond memories of that era, and the toys. I had the Stromberg helicopter. But there's no nostalgia with this. It's better than I originally thought. I used to love Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun more, but as Roger ones. But this is an all-time classic spar with me. And then you're in to number 3. So you're probably kind of starting to guess if, you give a damn however many people end up looking at this. I'm kind of just doing it more for me, for fun. But the top 3, well, you'll be aware of what hasn't been yet. So what are they? What is the top 3? Okay, so it's quite a tough one, this, because this used to be number 2, and there's maybe even a point where it was number 1. But when I watched it recently, I came to a decision. I thought, this is awesome. It's a little too long. Bit too long. And it has a glaring problem in it. I love all the James Bonds. Love Roger. Love Daniel. Love Sean. And got a lot of respect for Timothy Dalton. Like what he did. Love Pierce. I don't love George Lazenby, because that's not George Lazenby's fault. He wasn't an actor. It's On His Majesty's Secret Service. It's number 3, obviously, because I mentioned Lazenby. But he wasn't an actor, and he does his best in this film to act, or try to act. But he comes unstuck in longer dialogue scenes. So that's what undoes this film. But what he does bring to it, he is incredible in the fight scenes. That's what got him the job. He basically, he's Daniel Craig before Daniel Craig. He's really visceral. He's a tall bruiser of a man, Lazenby, an Australian, and he knew how to handle himself. You can see it in the fight scenes. And he looks good. He's got a good look. He's got a pleasant voice. He looks good on screen. I would describe him as a kind of like milk tray man. You remember the milk tray adverts? That, to me, what he's like. Oh, let's get someone who looks like James Bond. But Connery's a really good screen actor. Roger Moore's better than people give him credit for. Timothy Dalton's a proper Shakespearean actor. Pierce Brosnan, really experienced TV actor. Daniel Craig, very good film actor. All these guys had acting chops to do, and they bring that to bear in their portrayals of Bond. George Lazenby couldn't do that. He'd just done an advert as the Big Fry Man or something like that. But the other thing is, you couldn't have this story with the Sean Connery character because Sean Connery had established too much, impenetrableness in his characterisation. So the vulnerability that they can explore with Lazenby again will bear fruit in the Brosnan era and certainly the Daniel Craig. So again, there's things happening like they did in the Timothy Dalton era that other Bonds have benefited from. So that's the George Lazenby thing out of the way. What's the film like? Pre-credit sequence, really cool. One of the first self-reflective postmodern moments in a Bond film, but maybe in cinema, where he says, "This never happened to the other fella." It's brilliant. Then that's the opening sequence, very atmospheric, great cinematography. The guy did the cinematography on this, Michael Reed, actually shot a lot of horror films. He did a lot of Hammer stuff. I looked at his filmography. He kind of disappeared after this. No other Bond film looks like this. It's got a realism and a grit, but an artistry to the photography, and it's really cool. So anyway, now you've got the credit sequence. I don't know, I could get emotional. The Majesty Secret Service theme is magnificent. It's an incredible instrumental piece of music by John Barry. It's so majestic. And the credit sequence plays like a greatest hits of Bond. It goes back through the years, and it's like already that nostalgia of what we've seen with Bond, this magical journey we've been on, and then you see it play back through the credit sequence, and it uses images of the Union Jack and firmly puts a kind of patriotism into the Bond sphere that they will explore later on in Spy Love Me and beyond. Great Maurice Binder credit sequence, probably his best, I think, or one of his best. And once he did, Spy Love Me was fantastic, and some after that, but just that whole opening's amazing. And then you're into the film, and you got this sort of unique James Bond love story. This film, to put it at its level, it's one of Christopher Nolan's favourite films. So much so the whole sequence in Inception, where he's basically doing a tribute to Majesty's Secret Service. He also does the start of Dark Knight Rises, has a Bondian heist sequence with Bane. Other directors, I think Tarantino, have bigged it up, basically because it's the one Bond film that can stand alone outside the James Bond canon. You can just appreciate it as a great piece of action cinema. Some of the action on this is breathtaking. The skiing sequences are stunning. Yet now they've got some dodgy back projection bits, to get the actors into the shot. But when that camera pulls back and they're skiing down those mountains, and John Barry's score is piping up, we'll come back to Barry's score in a sec. It's majestic, epic cinema. There's also scenes where some helicopters come into the Piz Gloria, and they're flying near the end of the film. It just looks awesome. The photography, it's just epic. And then later on, Lazenby kind of slides down a skating rink to ice, patch or whatever, and he's shooting his machine gun. It's just brilliant. He looks great in that scene. So those elements are great. The plot, the plot is about Blofeld wants to unleash a virus on the world, and obviously with the situation we're in at the moment, it's very timely. Not that I believe that this is an engineered virus. I just think it's to do with how we treat animals. And ironically, he wants to put it in farm stock. But anyway, that's digressing. It's a cool plot. Telly Savalas, he's a good Blofeld, he's a good villain. We'll head them off at the precipice. I like that line. He's not great. Dan Urich fantastic. They hired they had a really top actress, basically because Lazenby had no experience, and Savalas, great actor as well. So. But this brings us back to John Barry's thing. What Barry realised was, by that point, his value to the Bond films, and he knew probably, or maybe when he was watching the rushes, like a need to pull out all the stops, and actually starting to get emotional now, because he didn't just pull out the stops. He created one of the greatest film scores ever in the entire history of cinema. The score for on Majesty's Secret Service is stunning. If you buy the CD, you'll get all the extras on it. The bit where he goes to do the safe cracking job, which is a great scene, just a really simple Hitchcockian tense scene. The scoring on that's magnificent. When that theme pipes up, like I say, and they're just going down the ski slope, for me, it's action film heaven. So, you know, it's a little too long. The struggle of Lazenby's acting does undermine it a bit. But it is a classic. It's become a classic of action cinema, like I say, that kind of outstrips the Bond films for a lot of filmmakers. Can't really think much more to say. It's got one of the best deaths in a. He had a lot of guts. He goes into the snowplow. It's got some great deaths. The guys get chucked off. You know, I like it when people fall off high things in films. Like, ah! You know, it's great. So I like Where Eagles Dare, the cable car fight. But yeah, it's you know, there's times where this has maybe been my number one. Okay, Majesty's Secret Service. That was that one. Number two. Dun, dun, dun. It can only be one of two films, can't it? And what stopped this, I think, is the third act. Although it's got better for me over time, I always had problems with the third act. Again, that third act problem with Bond's. Majesty's Secret Service has got a third act. And although it's got better over time, I still think it's just a little bit too long, and like the third act doesn't work as well as the first two acts, which are fucking fantastic, and it's Casino Royale. So just backtracking, obviously Daniel Craig got selected at the time to cast him. I was totally on board. I'd seen the film Layer Cake, and Craig's name had been mentioned, but very quietly I read somewhere, because people were talking about, I can't remember what actors they were talking about. It always happens with Bond. They always talk, you know, this actor up and that actor that. And there was a little rumbling of Daniel Craig, but he kind of disappeared. But when I watched Layer Cake, I thought, yeah. I'd seen him in Elizabeth and a few other things, and I thought, yeah, he this could work. He looks really good. So it didn't bother me when he was cast. I thought, you know, this guy's got proper chops. But it kind of worked in his favour. You know, the media slagged him off, and he thought, I'll fucking show you. You know, I'll show you what James Bond can act like. I'll show you what he can look like. And when we saw this this new body image for Bond, basically, you know, keeping up with the Wolverines and the Bournes of the world, you know, just awesome. And then just the pre-credit sequence is so cool in this film, because it's actually kind of like a Russia with Love play dance sequence. He just goes to do a hit really, but it's so atmospheric. And then you got a great line, Considerably. Then you go into the theme song, which I think's really good. A lot of people love the Chris Cornell song. I love the chorus, and the chorus is great. I think Chris Cornell did a great vocal, and that theme turns up throughout the film really well. I just think the verses lack something. They lack a little bit of sort of what I need to hear to build for the chorus. It's as if the chorus is far better than the verses. But it is a cool song, and the credit sequence is really good, you know, with the motifs of the cards and stuff like that. Love all that. Then you've got almost what is the pre-credit, what would normally be the pre-credit sequence, which is the free running sequence, which is stunning. And Craig, just the bit in that sequence where in one moment he just owns his Bond is when he basically you've got like the plasterboard wall and he just bashes through it because he hasn't got the time to use the door. It's fucking brilliant. He looks great, and his shirt. Then it goes on, he meets them, you know, he looks great, he's just owning it. And then he meets Vesper Lind, come to Eva Green's character, basically redefining the role of what was a Bond girl, finally becoming a Bond woman. For me, the greatest female character in James Bond history. You know, you needed to have great casting, and yeah, I think the studio weren't that keen on having her. They weren't sure if her English would be great, and Barbara Broccoli pushed for her, and Eva Green just looks so unusual. And in some ways, you know, for James Bond to fall in love and lose his heart, he needs to have someone who's, you know, he's used to beautiful women, isn't he? He's got some extra. The scene with them on the train I think is fantastic, one of my favourite Bond scenes. The scene at Miami Airport's really cool. That kind of gets forgotten about, but it's a really cool action sequence. I like the bit where he wins Aston Martin. It properly, you know, women and Bond's mates are always dying in films, and M properly brings into to book when the character Solange is murdered. I think she's called Solange. And it's like, look, you know, you can't just go around doing what you do and not have consequences. And I think that was really good. Really good kind of moral weight there. Really good musical score, great direction by Martin Campbell. Again, he launches James Bond again. I wish he'd done more Bond films, but I think he's pretty savvy, Martin Campbell. He realised that lightning doesn't strike twice. If you actually look when Bond directors have done 2 Bond films in a row, it's very rarely lightning strikes twice. Terence Young it got better, but he did Doctor No and Russia with Love, so he had somewhere to go. Lewis Gilbert, it didn't work. Guy Hamilton, when he did Three on the Trot, it didn't work quality wise, although I still really like him. So Martin Campbell's been quite sad. It'd be nice to see him do another one, but I think he's getting on a bit now. But again, it's got really cool photography. His shot selections, is the way he moves the camera, the way he doesn't intrude, but he kind of puts in what's needed. And then, the third act structure is a little convoluted. Like I say, I think he comes unstuck there, with what's going on a bit. But there's the fantastic torture scene as well, taken from the book. I mean, really, what they've done, the sad thing is with the Daniel Craig Bond, with Quantum of Solace, the film wasn't good enough, and then, they went to Skyfall and they kind of started to water his character down. And Spectre, like I say, he's got the Connery tux on the front, and when you look at this film, like the need to kind of get him back to where he was in this film, which is revolutionising what James Bond can be, what he is, physically and mentally. That's that great shot with the machete, the great scene in the shower, he sucks of fun, really cool. And finally got to bring us off to Mad Mikkelsen. When I first went to see the film, I thought it was very good. Repeated watches, he's one of the great Bond villains, brilliant actor. If you've seen him in the TV show Hannibal, he does a bang up job. Love the gambling scene, slow scene, probably bores some people, but love the bits where they're gambling, and he's brilliant in those scenes. He's got his little tell with his weeping eye. It's not perfect Casino Royale, but there's no perfect James Bond film, but it's as damn near as you're going to get. Like I say, I just feel that the Daniel Craig, I'm excited for the next film. I like Skyfall. I just think they need to look at what made us all fall in love with Daniel Craig in that film and try and put that in to the new one. We'll see. With some of the, obviously what the character's been through. So that brings us to number 1. You're probably not surprised. This has pretty much always been my number 1 Bond film. Occasionally, like I said, I've maybe veered with OHMS on Majestic Service. I'll not even try and do the thing. It's Goldfinger. Why is that? Fantastic score by John Barry. Not his best score, but probably his second best score. The best theme song ever, Goldfinger by Shirley Bassey. It starts with one of the great pre-credit sequences and really makes that an art form. You've got the Aston Martin. I had that toy twice when I was a kid. It was my whole world. Sean Connery, 3 films in. It's his peak performance as Bond along with Thunderball. Honor Blackman, Pussy Galore, classic Bond woman. The image of Shirley Eaton covered in gold. And then probably my favourite 2 elements of the film, the magnificent villainy of Goldfinger, and the amazing House of Carter as Oddjob. Probably my favourite bits is when they come out of the golf club and Bond has beaten, he's beaten Goldfinger by cheating, because Goldfinger's a cheat. Let's have a little fun with Mr. Goldfinger. It's a great gag about Arnold Palmer. Anyway, I just love it when he goes, Mr. Bond, people have time to cross me, Oddjob, and he clicks his fingers and John Barry's skull goes zing, and then Oddjob just gets his hat and just severs the top, and then Goldfinger says he owns the golf club. It's great bits. It's got some sort of shocking violence like the death of Tilly Masterson. The climax is great in Fort Knox. 2 more ticks and Mr. Goldfinger have hit the jackpot, but they added that in, like I think the numbers wrong on the dial on the bomb. Anyway, great set design. The amazing bit on the laser beam. Do you expect me to talk Goldfinger? No, I expect you to die, Mr. Bond. There's a few kind of plot things. There's a weird thing where he has the big meeting with the gangsters and gasses them. And it's like, if you don't want to work with these guys, anyway, why have you invited them and then gassed them? But that's just, it's just one of those things with Bond plot. Sometimes there is holes. In that respect, Goldfinger's not perfect. The climax is pretty funky, but it's a bit, he persuades Pussy Galore to switch the gas, and just, there's holes in this, but I think what it has is, this film took over the world when it came out, and it's got that thing, the Bondian atmosphere. There's bits just that couldn't be in any other film. The pure Bond, just thinking another little thing at the start where they're at the swimming pool in Miami. It's got back projection there. There's technical things where you think, yeah, it'd be nice if you'd gone on location for that. It's Goldfinger's kind of bigger than the sum of its parts, I think. It's just got so many elements that have become a lexicon of Bond, a lexicon of cinema. It had to be number one. So that's it. I mean, I've been through all these films. When I watch them again, I don't know. The last time I watched the Bond films, as you get older, I have seen these a lot of times, and although I enjoy them, it's difficult to find kind of fresh nuance. Sometimes you find yourself as you get older, picking holes more than you find new things. Like I said, I haven't seen the Daniel Craig or the Pierce Brosnan ones for a while, so I was kind of doing those off trace memory, apart from Spectre, which I've seen. As for the Bonds, like I've spoken a bit about them, you probably wondering who is my all-time favourite Bond. No, actually, so you're probably wondering, you probably know, fuck off, Ed, anyway. Me favourite Bond is still Sean Connery. Sorry, Daniel Craig fans. I just think the thing with the Sean Connery, he never made a bad Bond film. Okay, forget Never Say Never Again. That's not an official Bond film. His 6 James Bond films are really good. Doctor No, Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever. It's very hard to make classic Bond films. Who's it? Sean's made 2. Roger made 1. Daniel, he's nearly made 2. Maybe he'll make 2. But it's, for every Bond film that's top, it's hard to repeat that magic. But Sean Connery, they're all got some, and they're all of a certain standard, I think. There's no Quantum of Solace or Spectre sort of dullness with Sean. And it just looks so exotic. It was a time in the world where the places that the James Bond films went were, places we couldn't afford to go. So they've just got that sheen to them. Lazenby, I've already covered that really. Like I said, I think he's physically great in the action scenes. He just couldn't act or act enough. And obviously things went very wrong for him. They would have done another film with him and it could have got better, but that wasn't to be. Then you got Roger. People knock him. I grew up with Roger Moore. A laugh out loud funny. Spaller's a classic. Golden Gun, Live and Let Die are great. Moonraker's daft, but it's fun. For Eyes on Ronnie's a bit boring. One of his best performances. Octopussy's good fun. View to a Kill, he shouldn't have done it. Wish he'd stepped aside. When he passed, he was the first James Bond to go. Hopefully Sean will still be around. But it really hit me hard. I felt like a hole had appeared, in my life. And I went to see him at the Time Theatre when he appeared here in Newcastle. And he did a talk about his life and that, and he was great. He's just such a gentleman. So a lot of love for Roger Moore. Timothy Dalton, he did a lot for Bond. Obviously I do prefer like Pierce and Roger and that, but I totally respect his take on Bond. I think it's an important era, even though it wasn't as successful. Pierce Brosnan, he brought Bond back when people weren't thinking, I'm not interested in James Bond. He got it back in the consciousness and set things up for Daniel Craig. He's really good. He was just saddled with, some lame sort of action. I think Brosnan, it started off really well for him and then they kind of ran out of ideas. His films feel more like 90s action films that happen to be James Bond films rather than just James Bond films. But a lot of affection for Pierce, and then obviously Daniel Craig. I think he's the best Bond since Connery. I just hope his next film is worthy of his reign. But yeah, Sean number 1, Daniel 2, Roger 3, probably Pierce 4, Timothy 5, and Lazenby 6. That would be my Bonds. And that's it. Yep. So there we go. For anyone who's had a look at this, I hope you enjoyed that. Like I say, with this COVID-19 thing going on, I had time on my hands, so I just decided to do some things that I enjoy talking about, and I'm sure I've missed a lot of stuff. but you could probably waffle on about one James Bond film for a whole episode of things like this. Not that it's really done like that. Anyway, see you. Cheers, thanks.